All right, guys, welcome. My name is Daniel Marks. For those of you who don't know me, I am the founder of Scouting and Scavenging. We're an organization that encourages sports professionals to collect unused hotel toiletries for donation um, to people in need. And we've hosted a series of webinars during COVID on a variety of different topics in sports. And today we're very lucky to have Jeff Pearlman joining us. Jeff is a New York Times best-selling author, has written 9 books on a variety of different topics in the sports world, including his most recent book, Three Ring Circus, about the Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Phil Jackson era Lakers. He'll be talking about that, his career in general, and a number of other topics. So thanks to everyone for joining us. And Jeff will welcome you here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Amazing.
Thanks for being here, Jeff.
Yeah, I love what you guys do. I think it's awesome. So
yeah. So start off with a little bit of your background. Your first full-time job as a journalist was a fashion and food writer for the Nashville Tennessean. How do you go from that to then a job at Sports Illustrated and then to writing 9 books on sports?
Well, it was a ridiculous, I feel like my lighting is terrible. It was a ridiculous job. I was not a food and fashion writer by any trade or any logical thing. Basically, I came out of the University of Delaware in 1994 and turning my light on. And I had interned at the Nashville Tennessean the summer after my junior year, and they liked my writing, and they only had one position, which was food and fashion writer. It was the only position they had. I still am a terrible cook. I dressed up for this event with a t-shirt and a baseball hat. I mean, I can't cook and I can't dress, but they had this one job open, food and fashion writer. So I took this job. It was laughable. I was the worst food and fashion writer in the history of the world. I mean, it was abysmal. I didn't know what I was doing. And I also was a really crappy reporter. I was probably my first year in as a journalist was one of the worst years any journalist could have anywhere. I kept making mistakes. I didn't answer the right questions. I didn't know how to gather facts. I would lie to my editors to cover up my shortcomings. I mean, it was just a train wreck of a reporter. And what happened is I was really, really bad, like really, really bad. And my editor called me in one day and told me they were moving me to the police beat, that you need to learn how to report. You don't know how to report. You know, you're an okay writer, but you can't report for anything. So they moved me to the cops beat, and it probably saved my career and saved my life. And really, the focus was on reporting, not writing, and doggedness, and just getting the facts right. And all of a sudden, I was running out to fires and police chases and stuff like that. And it was really cool. And then when I came back from that, they put me on the high school wrestling beat. So the illustrious Nashville Tennessean high school wrestling beat of 1995 was owned by me. And I took it very seriously and busted my ass covering high school wrestling. And at the same time, my dream had always been to write for Sports Illustrated. My dream from the time I was in junior high was to write for SI. And I started sending out letters to them, to the magazine. And actually what happened is, to be honest, I sent a letter to SI and I designed it like the inside of the magazine to look like a letter from the editor of Sports Illustrated. So I had a masthead, I had a picture, and the letter said, "Dear readers," it was supposed to be a future issue of Sports Illustrated. "Dear readers, when Jeff Pearlman first applied to us, we had no idea who he was. It was some food and fashion writer in the South and blah, 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 blah. But all these years later, it was one of the best hires we ever made." So I did that and it caught their eye. And they said to me, "Why don't you pitch some story ideas? Because we don't really hire food and fashion writers that often." And I was like, I'm not a food and fashion writer, I swear. But they wanted story ideas. So I pitched a bunch of ideas. And the story that really made my career, this is a true story, is when I was in college at the University of Delaware, during my junior year, I applied early for the NBA draft as a lark to see what would happen. And I sent a letter to the NBA saying, "My name is Jeff Pearlman. I'm a junior forward at the University of Delaware," which is true because I was a forward on Edna's Edibles, the intramural runner-ups that year. And I said, I am surrendering my eligibility. I believe I'm ready to take my talents to the next level. And I didn't think much of it. And then a few weeks later, I get a letter back from the NBA. I literally walk into my dorm room And my roommate goes, Pearl, there's a letter from the NBA. And it, dear Mr. Pearlman, as of this date, we are surrendering your eligibility and blah, 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 blah. I was like, wow. Then a few weeks later, I'm home for like Christmas break and I get a call from the NBA's head of security. And this is pre-internet, real internet. And the guy's like, yeah, so this is Rod Thorne from the NBA. And I just, who are you? And I was like, well, I'm a forward at Delaware and I really feel like I'm ready to take my talents to this. Anyway, I did all that and I wrote a story for my college paper, but I told Sports Illustrated when they were like, why don't you pitch some ideas? I said, well, I once applied for the NBA draft. And they said, write that. And I wrote that as a freelance piece. It was my first story ever published in the magazine. And I got hired and moved to New York 5 months later. And that was really the beginning of my career takeoff.
Wow. Now you have a very distinctive personality and style of writing. How long did it take you to kind of develop that voice?
I don't know if I do. I mean, people say that, and I it's a compliment, and I appreciate it. I feel like the one thing is, I'm very New York. I was raised in New York, and I am very New York. Even though I live in California now, I'm very New York, and I talk with my hands, and I talk in short sentences, and there's a lot of but this, no, but this, and I feel like somehow or another that's gone into my writing a lot, where I'm not very big into long sentences. I'm not really big at dropping words that you're not going to know that you're going to have to run to a dictionary to look up. I'm not that smart. Like I'm not a super intelligent human being. So I sort of write to my intelligence level, which is short sentences. Here's the deal, like, and also like when you write, the goal really is to sort of, for it to be conversational. You want the reader to feel like he or she is in on the chat with you. So I just think over time I've learned to be very casual. And if that's a unique style, I don't know. I mean, there are other casual writers, but for me, it's being casual and a lot of like, like I'd say to you, I'd be like, Mike Trout is a freaking great baseball player. Well, why can't I write that? Mike Trout is a really freaking great baseball player. And then I might say to you, the other day I saw that guy climb a fence and he looked like King Kong scaling the Empire State Building. Well, maybe I say that to you and I can write that. Like there's not that big of a distance from the way I talk and the way I write. Just kind of who I am.
Now you mentioned the NBA draft piece kind of launching your career at SI. The first piece you were most
I know where this is
known
going.
for
Yeah.
would be the John Rocker piece that you wrote in 1999. And for those who aren't familiar, you spent a day with John Rocker in Atlanta where he kind of self-destructed and showed himself to be racist, homophobic, and otherwise insensitive on a day of charity events throughout the city. Like, what's it like as a reporter? You've got a tape recorder and you're basically recording someone, like, not end their career, but significantly diminish their standing.
Well, it's funny. I'm looking at the screen. I see a lot of young guys here. Do any of you, by a show of hands, even know who John Rocker is? I got 1, 2. That's amazing. 3. All right. Andrew, 4. Andrew was a late bloomer. Arthur, no idea, right? All right. Josh, okay.
I grew up a Mets fan, so I know John very, very well. So
all right. So basically, it's all right. I feel like if you do this job long enough, you get money stories. Like the one thing about journalism that I was told when I got to SI, there was a writer named Jack McCallum, this great writer, and he said to me, you're not going to make more money than most of your classmates. Like you're going to have classmates who become dentists and lawyers and doctors. And they're going to make more money than you. You're not going to drive the nicest car. At every high school reunion, you're going to have the best stories. And I feel like that's true. And you end up with money stories. And this was basically, I was a young baseball writer at Sports Illustrated. This is 1999. I was very young, very new. And Tom Verducci, who a lot of you guys know, was kind of the king of baseball writing at SI. And I would get the sloppies. So if Tom was doing the Yankees, I get the Mets. If Tom was doing the Cubs, I'd get the Brewers, that kind of thing. And the Mets and the Braves are in the playoffs, and so are the Yankees. So Tom was doing the Yankees, I was on Mets beat. And the Braves had this pitcher named John Rocker from Macon, Georgia. And John Rocker was their closer, and he was really good, but he was also just an insufferable asshole of a human being. And he would do things, talked a lot of trash. He used to like to, when there'd be a netting between him and the fans in visiting stadiums, he used to like to take a baseball and whip it hard at the netting and watch the fans recoil. Like he was that kind of guy, just a bad guy. So they asked me to do a story on John Rocker. And I went and this was during the playoffs, the National League playoff series between the Mets and the Braves. I went and I did it, and I didn't have that much time because you don't get that much time with players during the playoffs. So I got 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and I wrote the story about John Rocker, and it was John Rocker, misunderstood guy, and yeah, he seems like an asshole, but he's really a good guy if you get to know him. And it was one of the things early on. It was one of my great mistakes as a journalist, which is you should never go into a story or a book or anything already having the story written in your head. It's a huge mistake. You just shouldn't do it. You never know what you're going to find. So why go in? But I went in thinking this is going to be this great story about misunderstood genius. So I actually wrote that story. The Braves made it to the World Series. They got swept by the Yankees. Story never ran. My editor, a guy named Dick Friedman, said, it's a few weeks later, he's like, why don't you go down to Georgia and freshen it up, see if Rocker will talk with you. I remember I called John Rocker's agent, who was a former Major League Baseball player named Joe Sambito. And I said, hey, this is Jeff from Sports Illustrated. I really want to come down and freshen up the story. How would you feel about that? And his agent, Rocker's agent, is like, oh, it's awesome. You're going to love him. He's the best guy. He's great. Great idea. You're just going to love it. You should spend the day with John. It's going to be great. It's like, all right. I fly down to Georgia. True story. He picks me up on the side of the road where we're driving. And I just want to say, I'm about to say some stuff, none of which I agree with. We're driving down the road, and there's a car in front of us, and it's kind of swerving. And Rocker goes to me, effing Asian women, fucking Asian women, they can't drive for shit, blah, 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 blah. Well, we go past the car. It's a white man driving the car. We pull up to a toll booth, and it's one of the toll booths where you throw in change. Throws in a quarter, toll booth doesn't go up. Throws another quarter, toll booth doesn't go up. Guy behind us starts honking. Rocker rolls down the window, sticks up the middle finger. F you. Then he hucks a loogie onto the toll booth machine. Finally, somehow it opened. We're driving to a school where he's going. Basically, it's like, have the reporter come along as John Rocker does something nice. We're going to a school where he's speaking to disadvantaged kids. We're driving there, and I'm like, do you like doing these events? He's like, no, effing hate it, but blah, 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 blah. We get there. When he was pitching for the Braves, he would run into the game out of the bullpen to the song "I Want to Rock" by Twisted Sister. Terrible song. I want to rock. So they play the song. Oh, at this school they play the song, and John Rocker comes out. Kids go crazy. It's awesome. We're leaving the school. He steals the CD. This is like a tiny school in Podunk, Georgia. He literally takes the CD with one hand as we're leaving and puts it in his pocket. So I've witnessed that. We're spending the day driving around. He hates foreigners. He calls a black teammate a fat monkey. He tells me that everyone who works as a character at Disney is gay. His girlfriend leaves the car, and he immediately calls his other girlfriend. He's the worst. And I'll tell you the funniest thing that I thought was the most telling thing about him for everything. At one point, we were going to lunch, and we're going to lunch, and we were walking down a strip mall sidewalk, and he had a pen, and he dropped the pen. And I was walking by him, and I picked up the pen. And I said, "Hey, you dropped your pen," and he goes, "Yeah, I meant to do that." And I remember thinking, like, what sort of deranged animal of a person purposely goes through his mind? I have this pen in my hand. I'm done with it. Therefore, I will let it go and drop it on the sidewalk. Like, what kind of person does that? I just remember thinking that's so weird. So I go back and I write this story. I actually called my mom as soon as the day was over. Rocker was like, "Hey, great time." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And as soon as it was done, I actually called my mom, and I was like, "I don't know what the hell just happened." And I wrote the story, just my day with John Rocker. And for those of you who weren't alive or don't remember, I mean, the thing just blew up. It went viral before viral, where it was everywhere. At the time, Rudy Giuliani and Hillary Clinton were running for the Senate in New York, and they were asked about it. Will Ferrell did a great John Rocker spoof on Saturday Night Live. He got demoted. He got suspended. He got fined. All sorts of crap. His career was never really the same. And I mean, the question you asked was, I guess, how does it feel to sort of have that happen to someone? And the honest answer is it feels crappy. Like, I never thought he should have been suspended. I never thought he should have been fined. Like, Major League Baseball encourages these people to talk, and not everyone is going to share level-headed, socially correct views. Like, some of these people are going to be racist from Macon, Georgia, and you either decide you want them to talk and you're not going to like everything they say, or you don't have them all talk. But this guy did exactly what baseball told him to do. He had a reporter drive around with him. I thought John Rocker was a horrible human being. I still think he's a horrible human being. But I never took any happiness in the downfall of his career.
What's it like as a reporter when you press send on something that you know is going to change the way an athlete is perceived in the public light?
I didn't know. I actually didn't know. I was too naive. I was like, oh, it's a story, and I guess it'll maybe be big. I don't know. I don't think I had the awareness at that point. I've since had it where I've written books where you're like, there's some stuff in here that someone's not going to like, or there's some stuff. Example is I wrote a Roger Clemens biography years ago, and there was a pretty lengthy discussion about steroids or breakdown of steroids and a lot about Mike Piazza and his use of PEDs. Well, no one had written about that before, at least to that level. I knew it wasn't going to go over well. It didn't go over well. I think my number one reaction, honestly, when I sense stuff like that, or when I know stuff like that is coming out, is a little bit of fear. Just being honest. I'm not one of those writers who's like, yeah, bring it, bring it. I'm not that guy. I don't like confrontation. I have dealt with it many times in my career, and I accept it as part of the job. I don't love confrontation. I don't love people being pissed off at me. It's just sort of the deal that comes with being a journalist, I guess.
Now, when you went to cover the Braves the following year, you and Rocker got into an altercation outside the locker room. What was it like? What was your mindset going into that setting? And then what was it like being physically confronted by, he was a pretty big, strong dude.
No, he could snap me in half. And he also was using PED. He was juiced out of his ears, so it's funny. When I was at the Nashville Tennessean, so I went from the Tennessean to Sports Illustrated. My second to last story I ever wrote in Nashville, I covered a high school football game. And it was between David Lipscomb Academy and Goodpasture Christian in 1996. And I wrote a line about the David Lipscomb quarterback. I said, David Kirkow had an up and down game. His passes were way too up and way too down. Okay. And the next day at the newspaper, the phones were off the hook. People calling from the school saying, how dare you attack a high school football player like that? How dare you do that? That was mean. That was vicious, blah, 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 blah. My editor was a guy named Larry Taft. And for my final assignment, he sent me to cover the following week's David Lipscomb football game, where all these people were mad at me. And I was like, I don't want to go to this game. And he's like, you need to go. And I was like, I don't want to go. And he's like, you need to show your face. Like, this is part of being a journalist, is accountability. And you need to be accountable. So I go to the game. And when you cover high school sports, you go down to the field for the last part of the game. And I walk down to the David Lipscomb sidelines, and a bunch of the players, including their quarterback, David Kirkow, surround me. And the quarterback comes up to me and says, don't you ever come around here again. And it's funny because that was my last ever assignment in Nashville, Tennessee. And just some pissant high school quarterback actually thinks he ran me off out of town when I was leaving anyway. But I thought the lesson was really good, which is you show your face, you be accountable. So the following year, after John Rocker was suspended and fined and ridiculed and publicly shamed, I went back to Atlanta to cover Braves Yankees. I didn't have to, but I knew I should. And I was terrified. John Rocker was about 6'4", 225. I'm 6'2", 190, So I'm there and I'm spending, it was Yankees Braves. I'm spending a lot of time in the Yankee locker room, and I know I need to walk down to the Braves to at least say I tried. And I'm walking through this tunnel underneath Turner Field, and I hear this voice. I'm looking down and I hear a voice, and it says, you don't know how long I've been waiting for this. And it was John Rocker. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And he comes up to me and he turns his hat around like this, and he gets right in my face. And he's like, do you have any effing idea what you did to me? Do you have any blah, 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 blah. He's chewing me out. He's jabbing his finger in my chest. And the only time I had any moment of anything during that whole thing was he's like, I drove you around Atlanta. I introduced you to my friends. I paid for lunch. And I was like, actually, I paid for lunch. Well, F you, blah, 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 blah. So you should always pay for lunch. It was terrifying. It sucked. But it was like 2 minutes. It felt like 20, and like at the end, I was like this and nervous and not fun. But again, like I kind of felt like it was the right thing to do. And he deserved to have his moment to chew me out. And if he hit me, I wouldn't be doing this right now. I'd be sitting on my yacht in Tahiti, so could have worked out either way.
Yeah. Now, you went from SI to Newsday and then started writing books full time. What's the process like when you decide to write a book? Is it like, I'm interested in this subject, let me pitch it to a publisher, or publishers pitch you on subjects? How does that all work?
So I have an agent, and I'm always thinking of ideas. I'm always like, I mainly writing books is 99% of my thing these days. And I'll always toy with ideas and think about it. And I'll talk to my agent and we'll kind of go over them. Like I'm working on a book now. My next book is a Bo Jackson biography. And I love Bo Jackson. You guys know who Bo Jackson is, right? Please tell me you know who Bo Jackson is. Okay, thanks. And I don't want to feel that old. And I grew up with a poster on my wall of Bo Jackson. And I said to my agent, I was like, I really want to write a Bo Jackson book. And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, well, I'm gonna write a proposal. And basically I write a proposal and you shop it around to different publishing houses and you hope someone's interested. In this case, the same publisher as my last book bought it. And then I'm just all in. Like my life right now is 100% Bo Jackson. Not 100%. I have kids and a wife and a life, but it's researching, it's reporting. I'm literally sitting here on a bed right now with Marcus Allen's autobiography, with a book about the 1983 Pine Tar game that involved the Kansas City Royals, which Bo Jackson would play for later. It's just nonstop, digging and searching and seeking and finding. And it's a bear, but I love it, but it's a bear.
Now, in college, I did internships at Dime Magazine, a basketball magazine based in New York
Dime.
City. Yeah,
Yeah.
so did that for a couple summers. And one of my least favorite parts of the job was transcribing after a story. Now, for some of your books, you're interviewing 500 plus people and probably some of them multiple times. How do you transcribe all that information? And then how do you make it all usable for you as you're writing the book?
All right. So for shorter interviews, like let's say last few days, I've interviewed guys who played against Bo in college. So I interviewed two guys today who played at Southwest Louisiana, which is Auburn. Bo Jackson went to Auburn. Auburn opened against Southwest Louisiana in 1985. I've interviewed a couple of players from those teams. For those guys, I don't tape. I type. Over the years, especially as a young journalist coming up, you learn to type really fast, and I'm very fast typing, and I'll type so I don't those interviews. I'm just doing like that. For longer interviews, I do transcribe, and it sucks. I actually recently found a college student who approached me and said he wanted to transcribe for 25 cents a minute. And considering the going rate is about $1 to $1.50 a minute, I was all in. So basically right now I have a college student doing a lot of the transcribing. It's good for his resume, it helps his resume, and also helps me, blah, blah, blah. So no, it's terrible. It's the worst part of it all is transcribing. It takes, I'm not very good at it even. Like I could have a 2-hour interview with a subject and it'll take me an entire day just to transcribe the interview because you get distracted and bored and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, it's terrible. The key is find a college student who wants to do it for a quarter of a minute.
Now you like for when you're reaching out to people about these books, most of these people you've never met before, some you meet in person, a lot of them you just conduct interviews over the phone. How do you get subjects to open up and trust you and be honest with you about their experiences when you really don't know them?
I mean, the number one key in that regard is knowing your stuff going in. Like, you don't want to interview someone and be like, so how old are you? Or so how do you spell your last name? If it's a person who you can know that information. Where are you from? Like those are things you should know. You should never go into I always tell I teach out here journalism. Like you're doing a Mike Trout profile. You better not ask Mike Trout how he spells his last name or even what his mother's name is. Like all that stuff is readily available. And the other thing is I always make sure to know stuff about them, right? I always make sure. The perfect example is I interviewed these two football players who played at Southwest Louisiana. I'm going to go to the Pro Football Reference page and see name all the different players who played at that school, and I'll be able to be like, hey, oh, you know who played there? I didn't know you went to the same school as so and so. That guy also, like, just something to show that you know who they are. You've taken an interest. Look at their career resume before you talk to them. It really opens up and shows that you're not like I hate. Perfect example. I did a radio interview today to promote my book that just came out, and the guy's like, can you talk about what you found about Kobe Bryant? And as soon as he asked that, I knew this guy hadn't read the book, right? And there was like excerpts online all over the place. I knew he didn't read the book. I knew he didn't look at the excerpts. And I was kind of like, oof, I'll go through the motions, but this is not like I'm not enjoying this at all. And it's the same when you're interviewing people. You just want to go into it knowing as much about them as possible. Show that you're interested. Show, and also there's nothing wrong. I always say find a commonality with people. Um, if you find out the guy you're interviewing is from Gary, Indiana, maybe you went to Gary, Indiana one time. Oh, you're from Gary, Indiana? I went there one time. There was this restaurant called McDowell's. You ever been there? Oh yeah, blah 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 blah. Like that stuff goes a long, long way. Making a personal connection, even if it's small, and even if it's not 100% sincere. I mean, it has to be honest, but if it doesn't really mean that much, but still, that personal connection goes a long way.
Now, we're going to talk about Three Ring Circus, but first, given the election, your previous book, Football for a Buck, was about the United States Football League in the 1980s. It's one of my personal favorite sports books by you or anyone else. And a large part of that book details President Trump's ownership of the New Jersey Generals. And you've released the book in 2018. He was obviously elected in 2016. Was the impetus, and you grew up a USFL fan, and you mentioned that numerous times throughout the book, was the impetus for the timing of this book Trump becoming the president, given the role he played, or did that have nothing to do with it?
Zero. I've been dreaming of writing that book for years and years. Could never get a book deal. How many of you guys knew what the USFL is? Show of hands. So yeah, it's totally, the USFL was a rival league to the NFL. Oh, Mike, thank you. I really appreciate that. God bless you. Now you're just kissing my ass. Now you're just kissing my ass. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm really flattered. The USFL was a rival league to the NFL in the early 80s, and it was a spring league. And the one thing they did, they signed a lot of former NFL players, and they signed 3 straight Heisman Trophy winners to skip the NFL. They signed Herschel Walker, Mike Rozier from Nebraska, and Doug Flutie. All went to the USFL first. There was Steve Young started there, Reggie White started there, a lot of stars. I dreamed of writing this book for years because I love the USFL and I knew the stories would be great, and I could never get a deal. My agent literally said to me, nobody wants a book about the effing USFL. And so what happened is I pitched a Brett Favre biography, and I had a bunch of people bidding on it. And I said, I would take less money to write this if you give me a deal for the USFL. And this company, Howard Mifflin, who's published my last few books, said, okay, but you have to write the Favre book first. And I was like, oh, fine. Wrote the Favre book, loved actually the whole experience. And then I wrote this book about the USFL, and I only had a year to do it because the money was terrible. It was so freaking fun. It's the most fun book I've ever written. It was just a joy. Everyone wanted to tell their stories. And oh, by the way, Donald Trump ruined it, like just ruined it. And it's really fascinating because I'm working on this book. I was reporting it while he was running for president. And I kept saying to people, now there might be some people here who think Donald Trump's the greatest guy ever. I apologize. I personally do not. I'm researching it, telling people, this guy's a con man. This guy's a con man. Oh my God, I got to tell you about this. I got to tell you about that. It's insane. Like, I'll give you a perfect example that just like, it still makes me laugh and cry. At the same time, Donald Trump is going around saying Mexico is going to build a wall. We're going to build a wall, and Mexico is going to pay for it. He signed Doug Flutie. Do you guys know who Doug Flutie is? Anyone? Former? Yeah, okay. Kendall, I'm kind of looking at you. You're in my focus here. You know Doug Flutie? Yeah, okay. So Doug Flutie, Boston College Heisman Trophy winner. He signs Doug Flutie, right, to the biggest contract in pro football history. And it's awesome because the NFL had very little interest in Doug Flutie because at the time, this was pre-Russell Wilson, pre-Kyler Murray, like smaller quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks wasn't a thing in the NFL. You're supposed to be a quarterback, you were supposed to be 6'3", whatever, 200 pounds. Supposed to be Joe Montana, not Doug Flutie. But Donald Trump decided they needed Doug Flutie. So he spends more money on Doug Flutie than anyone's ever gone in the history of professional football. And he tells other people, don't worry, we're going to sign Doug Flutie, but the rest of the teams are going to help pay his salary. And he signs Doug Flutie, and he sends a letter that I have to every other owner and the commissioner saying, I have done the USFL a great service by signing Doug Flutie. Now I expect all of you to pay a portion of his salary. And here's what the rest of the league said. None of them did it. Like none of them, not one. Everyone's like, yeah, no. And I was like, this is the wall. This is a freaking wall. Like this is the same. When he was being accused of colluding with Russia, right? I'm reporting this book. I swear to God, this is all true. the only reason he got into the USFL is because he wanted an NFL team, and he thought somehow this could force the NFL's hand. So he owns the New Jersey Generals, the USFL, and Pete Rozelle was the commissioner of the NFL at the time. And Kendall, Pete Rozelle, you know who he is? Okay, good. Pete Rozelle is checking. Pete Rozelle, commissioner of the NFL, and Donald Trump asked Pete Rozelle to meet him in a suite at the Pierre Hotel in New York City, and they meet, and Donald Trump says to him, "This is not a direct quote. This is what he said though. I will kill the USFL if you get me an NFL franchise." And Pete Rozelle says, "As long as I am involved in the NFL, as long as my heirs are involved in the NFL, you will have nothing to do with this league." And I'm hearing this at the same exact time he's being accused of colluding with Russia. Now, you may say he didn't collude, you may say he did. I'm saying he was capable of it because he literally was throwing his own league under the bus to get an NFL franchise. So I'm reporting all this stuff. And even now, with the lawsuits, the alleged lawsuits, like he basically sued the NFL on behalf of the USFL, and the league died. They ended up winning $1, and he killed the USFL. So I didn't write the book because of Trump. I certainly didn't time it because of the election. But it was weird. It was really weird.
Now, as you're reporting the book, like, what's the reaction of people who knew him during that time to the fact that he's first a candidate kind of out there, and then gaining steam, the nominee, and then actually becomes the president? Like, what's the reaction of people who knew him back then and knew about his role in the league?
So here's my controversial, interesting take that I kept saying to my wife because I found it really interesting. I would say all the USFL players, everyone in the USFL blamed Donald Trump for ruining the USFL. Okay, it wasn't like anyone was like, no, he was great. I would say there was a 50% split right down the line, basically, between African-American players and white players, former players. I would say the vast majority of white players I talked to, we talked about, supported Donald Trump for president. And there was not one African-American player I talked to who supported Donald Trump for president. And that was the first time I really started seeing the divide about Donald Trump in this country. Was football. I mean, pro sports I covered baseball at Sports Illustrated for years. And I would say that generally what I found was there was a conservative, not conservative divide among players from different backgrounds and ethnicities. And I thought with the USFL, that was really fascinating, that a lot of the white guys were like, he ruined the league, but you know what? I can't vote for Hillary. I heard that a ton. He ruined the league, but I can't vote for Hillary. And it's weird. Like the owner of the Houston Gamblers was a guy named Jerry Argovitz. He blamed Trump for the destruction of his league. He wrote a book blaming Trump for the destruction of the USFL, and he became one of his biggest supporters running for president. It was weird. I don't know.
Now, you saw this last spring, you had two leagues, you had the reincarnated XFL and then the Alliance of American Football try to become spring alternatives to the NFL, and both flopped before they completed a full season. Like, do you think there's a viable market for a second professional football league, or it's like NFL is king and nothing is going to work?
I mean, as a minor league, maybe. As a competitor, no. The USFL actually could have worked. The USFL was a great idea. Spring, so we're not going head to head with the NFL. They had their drafts they had regional drafts. Every team had a regional draft. So like the Philadelphia Stars, for example, you had a general draft where you could pick from anyone. But then you would have a regional draft where they were assigned teams or regional teams, schools. So the Philadelphia Stars would wind up with team players from Pitt, Penn State, Delaware. I forgot what the other was, maybe Villanova. So if you were a fan in that area of college players, you'd watch them as pros. That was the idea. It was really smart. The USFL just got greedy and stupid. The problem now is the NFL is 365. Like it wasn't back then. It is now. The NFL has its own network, has its own website. The combine has become a thing. The draft has become a huge thing. I just don't see how a league can come along. Like I was saying, like I could take my Sunday and watch Russell Wilson. Do I want to take my Sunday and watch Trent Richardson? If he's your best player, I don't really think so. So I just think the NFL is too much of a lead on the other. And also the financials of it all are just, starting a league is really expensive, obviously. And it's just really hard to sustain.
Now transitioning to Three Ring Circus. So you did a book about the Showtime era Lakers and then Three Ring Circus about the Kobe, Phil, Shaq era. What were the biggest differences and similarities between those two periods of Lakers history?
I mean, they were really different more than they were similar. The similarities are you have a iconic coach, Phil Jackson, Pat Riley. You have an iconic guard, Kobe, Magic, and you have an iconic big man, Kareem and Shaq. I think the Showtime Lakers of the '80s were uh, more talented, top to bottom. I just think you look at the players in those teams, and there was a lot. You had the big two, you had Magic, Kareem, but you also had, you know, Jamal Wilkes and Norm Nixon and Byron Scott and Michael Thompson and James Worthy. Just a lot of great players. What I think is really interesting about the Shaq Kobe era, which I'm sure most of you guys remember much better, is it was Shaq, Kobe, and a lot of really interesting role players. There was a lot of guys who fit slots. Rick Fox, a slot. Robert Ory, a slot. Brian Shaw, a slot. Derek Fisher, a slot. A lot of those guys are eighth men, ninth men on NBA teams. None of those guys are starting for most NBA teams. Glenn Rice would start for a lot of teams, but even when he was at the Lakers, he was on the downside. They were just a team made up of guys who filled their roles really well. And I thought one thing that was interesting that you didn't need with Magic when he was young is a lot of guys were brought in to be babysitters for Kobe. Rick Fox was a babysitter to Kobe. John Sally was a babysitter. Derek Harper was a babysitter. Ron Harper was a babysitter. It was this idea that like the coaches are always like, "Can you talk to Kobe? Can you talk to Kobe?" They had a guy named J.R. Reed, who when I was a kid was a really good player in North Carolina. And J.R. Reed came in that Glenn Rice trade from Charlotte. And one day, Jerry West, the GM of the team, pulled him aside and said, "You know, I really like the way you deal with players. Can you maybe talk to Kobe about sort of being a better teammate?" And J.R. Reed was like, "Yeah, of course." So J.R. Reed told me the story. Like they're on the plane. "Hey, Kobe, we're all playing poker in the back. Why don't you come back?" "Nah, I'm good, man." "Hey, Kobe, we're all going out for dinner. Why don't you come out?" "Nah, I'm good." "Hey, Kobe, you want to go see a movie? There's so-and-so who's playing." "Nah, I'm good." He finally went back to Jerry West and he was like, "There's nothing I can do here. I just can't do anything here." Magic was deferential to Kareem. Magic was very deferential to Kareem. He called him Cap for captain. He knew his job was to get him the ball. He wasn't trying not to. And I think Shaq wanted Kobe to be deferential. I know Shaq wanted Kobe to be deferential. And it just wasn't who Kobe was. And that's not an insult. He just wasn't that guy. He showed up for his first training camp. Dale Harris, the coach, then told me the story. They're all, oh no, actually, it was someone else. David Booth, a forward, told me. They're all gathered in a circle introducing themselves first day. "Yo, I'm Nick Van Exel. Yo, I'm Shaq. My name's Kobe. I'm from Lower Merion High School. Nobody here is going to punk me." He was freaking 18 years old, straight out of high school. "Nobody here is going to punk me." That was his intro to the Lakers. It just sets a different guy than the way Magic came along out of Michigan State. So it was, you know, very different.
Now, those three guys, Phil, Shaq, and Kobe, all had pretty distinctive personalities. And towards the end of the era, that kind of spilled out into the public. Do you think that if that team had existed in the social media age today, that they would have survived together as long as they did?
I think yes. I know the answer is supposed to be no in a way, but I think they, first of all, Shaq is made for social media. I mean, Shaq is me, as you see now, Shaq is made for social media. He's kind of a blessing this day and age. Like I feel like with all the negativity, you can always go to Shaq and be like, "Ah, Shaq." I don't think Phil Jackson would have cared. Kobe probably would have struggled a little bit, but he had such thick skin. He really did. The guy was blessed with the thickest skin you ever see. He was not like the weird thing about that Shaq Kobe relationship actually is you would think Shaq being the veteran and Kobe being the young guy, you would think Kobe would be insecure and nervous, and Shaq would be like, "Hey, it's okay." And it was the exact opposite. Like Kobe didn't give a crap about Shaq. He didn't care. Like, "I don't want to be your big brother. I don't want to be your little brother. Like, I don't want to be Robin to your Batman." And Shaq is like, "Wait, why don't you want to be Robin to my Batman? I don't get it." And so I think Kobe, he probably had a shield about him that wouldn't have been particularly upset about people, you know, hashtag ball hog. I think he would have been okay with that, you know. So I think they would have been fine.
Now, obviously, the book comes out September. Kobe dies tragically in January. The book, there's some non-flattering things said about Kobe by others and through the writing because you're trying to give an accurate depiction of that era. How much did it weigh on you that like this book was sort of going to be the first long form book detailing a part of Kobe's life and career, and the reaction of people to reading that and reading those things about him, given what had happened?
It was like a building on my head. Every day, it weighed on me every day. So basically the book was done. I'm sitting in a coffee shop, January 26th. I get a text from a friend of mine who says, rumors are, reports Kobe Bryant's dead. And I'm like, that doesn't, I live in Southern California. Like that doesn't even make sense. But then of course you start Googling and you see it's TMZ and then well, maybe it's TMZ. And then you're like, holy shit. And it's funny because I texted Rick Fox and said, did you hear about this? And then I saw a report that Rick Fox was on the helicopter, which it turns out he wasn't. And I was like, oh. So my first reaction for a long time was just the human reaction, which is I just can't believe this. And living out here, you really saw it. I've been telling people this a lot. I'm from New York. Any New Yorkers here? Anyone? No. One. There we go. Gary from New York. So I'm from New York, and from my childhood, the biggest nick by far was Patrick Ewing, like by far. If Patrick Ewing died in a helicopter crash, it would be sad and there'd be tributes, but it wouldn't be like this. Like this was intense. And what I really saw was that people, it wasn't about the winning. It wasn't just the winning with Kobe. It was like people felt, especially younger people, felt like this guy taught me how to work. And this guy taught me how to drive. And this guy gave me sort of, you can put a dream down and you can pursue it and you can do it. So it wasn't like Patrick Ewing, it would have been Ewing. He was great. He was a great Nick. But this was so much more than that. It was so much more visceral and like people felt it. And it wasn't about the winning. It really wasn't. It was about something that Kobe instilled in them. So you're me, and you know you have this book coming out. And it's 96 to 04. And you're right. Like it's not the most flattering book to Kobe. I don't think it destroys Kobe in any way, but it's not super flattering. And a lot of times he was a pain in the ass and he was selfish and teammates did not love him and he was difficult and blah, blah, blah. So I ended up writing a 3-page forward to the book, basically an author's note explaining how the Kobe Bryant you're about to read about is a growth period in his life. It's not who he was at 41 when he was a dad of 4 and, blah, 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 blah. But I was really, really, really nervous about how this would fly. And to my amazing shock and relief, I think I've received 2 negative tweets and 2. That's it. And I think 1 review on Amazon, maybe saying like, this guy hates Kobe. And I know I don't hate Kobe, so that doesn't affect me at all. And I know I didn't go into it thinking I'm going to destroy Kobe. Otherwise, the reviews have been really positive and the take has been positive. So I'm relieved.
And over the course of reporting the book, what were like the 1 or 2 stories that maybe didn't make it into the book that you're like, man, I wish I could have put this in there, whether it's about Shaq, Kobe, Phil, or just those teams in general?
See, I don't work that way. That's always a question. It's going to be a disappointing answer. To me, like the only reason, if I have a great story, I'm not putting in if someone says you can't use this, then I'm not putting it. But I don't have like, I really don't. I don't have like, I have great things that happened reporting the book that maybe I didn't delve into a lot. Like, I mean, I wrote a little about this, but I got 8 hours with Phil Jackson driving around Montana. I actually thought Phil Jackson was going to give me an hour on the phone. Jeannie Buss, the Lakers owner, connected me with Phil. And she's like, here's his email. And I emailed him and he's like, well, when do you want to talk? And I was like, can I come out to Montana? He's like, yeah, I guess so. And I met him at a coffee shop in Montana. And he's kind of a gruff guy, and I see him walking. I'm waiting outside the coffee shop. I see him walking down. He's obviously recognizable. And I'm like, hey, I just want to thank you for doing this. First thing he says to me, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Jeannie. And I'm like, well, this is going to suck. Then we sit down and he's okay. And he's like, so I was thinking I would drive you around Flathead Lake. I was like, all right, great. It's like a 3-hour drive around this lake. And we stopped for lunch. We're chatting and he's a tour guide in Montana. And then we're done. And he's like, you want to come back to my place and just sit? I was like, great. Sitting on the patio with Phil, the cat crawling all over us, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, I'm going to take a nap. You want to have dinner later? I was like, yeah, great. I basically won the some like corporate hedge fund guy would win like the $100,000 spend a day with Phil Jackson in Montana prize. Like I won that just being a journalist. It was awesome. And the other one that the yin to that yang is, do you guys remember J.R. Ryder? Give me a show of hands. Anyone remember J.R. Ryder?
Jailblazers.
So, yeah, J.R. Ryder, worth Googling. You're a big J.R. Ryder fan? I can't hear you because you're muted, but yeah. J.R. Ryder was this crazy player. He played for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He threatened to kill a bunch of reporters. He won the slam dunk championship. He smoked a ton of weed. He was all over the map, right? He was late a million times for stuff. And I decided I really wanted to talk to J.R. Ryder, but I didn't have a phone number, but I had an address in Arizona. There was going to be in Arizona. So I decided I'm going to go knock on J.R. Ryder's door. And I've done this before, knock on doors. It's always scary, but exciting, right? It's like I always say, it's like being on a plane with really bad turbulence. You're like, this is fun. This is terrible. This is fun. This is terrible. So I drive up to J.R. Ryder's house. It's like the stucco house in the middle of suburbia, picture like flat suburbia. Gather my breath. I have a copy of my USFL book with me. Knock on it or ring the doorbell. Little kid answers. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for J.R. Ryder. He's like, hold on one second. This woman comes to the door. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for J.R. Ryder. I'm a reporter. Hold on one second. She closes the door. I hear these two people yelling. It's like, what the? J.R. Ryder comes to the door. He goes, who are you? Hey, my name's Jeff Pearlman. I'm a writer, blah, blah, blah. He's like, no, man. No. Bro, you don't just, bro. No, bro. No. You do not just fucking what? You just, are you, what? Bro, no. Then he opens the door. And I'm like, oh, he's like, bro, man, no, man. That is so not cool. You just show up here. You show up here. And then he goes, what's that book you have? I was like, well, it's a book I wrote about the USFL. Is that the Trump League? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, yeah. I was like, I brought it for you. Like, oh. So what are you writing about? I was like, the Shaq Kobe Lakers, doing a book about it. You were there. All right, man, I'll talk to you. Okay, I'll talk to you. Give me 2 hours of awesome. So like, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. J.R. Ryder is now one of my favorites. It's part of the joy of this job, I got to say. That wasn't the question, but one of the joys of this job, truly. It's like my, sorry, again, my charter. It's like my colleague said long ago, you're always going to have the best stories about high school reunion. You really do.
Now, outside of the people that you've mentioned, who is your favorite person to talk about for the book? Maybe like that's not someone like of that Kobe, Shaq, Phil, obviously level. Even J.R. Ryder is like a pretty well-known guy. Is there anyone that was like, man, this guy had just such great insight into those teams?
Oh, yeah, there were a bunch. So Kareem Rush was a guard out of Missouri, and he was Kobe's backup. I met him at a Starbucks. Few observations about Kareem Rush. He's the best looking human being I've ever sat across from. Like, every now and then you're in the presence of someone who's just really good looking and you're like, man, I'm so outclassed here. It's not even funny. And this is almost I just remember being like, this guy is just really good looking. And like, we met at a Starbucks and he's like, he told me something. He was great about, so Shaq and Kobe 03-04 is the last season. And Kareem Rush, I think, was a rookie on those teams. And he thought everything was great. This is the year where they brought in Peyton and Malone. They made the finals, but they didn't win. But Malone got hurt. So there was a lot of like, well, if they'd had Malone, Pistons beat them handily. And Kareem Rush told me, he's like, well, that was a great year. I'm great. This is great. And I can't believe this. I'm so lucky I'm on the Lakers. This is awesome. And they had a party after they lost the final game in Detroit of that series. And they were done. And he's thinking, this is great. Everything's great. And Kobe comes up to him. I know I've done it a few times. Can I curse on this little event? Is that,
Sure.
Yeah. He goes, Kobe walks up to him. And Kareem Rush is like, hey, Kobe. And Kobe's words to him are, I ain't never playing with that motherfucker again. And he was talking about Shaq. And Kareem Rush is like, wait, what? Like, what just happened here? And I think he told me this too, or maybe Shaq told me this. It was this little party after they lost in Detroit before they fly back. And Jerry Buss, the owner of the Lakers, shows up. And Jerry Buss, so basically, Kobe has gone through the whole rape trial in Eagle, Colorado, and he's threatening to leave for the Clippers. Shaq wants a contract extension. The whole thing's a mess. And Kobe has made it clear he hates Shaq and doesn't want to play with him anymore. They're at this party. Jerry Buss walks in. Shaq is there with his wife. Jerry Buss walks right past Shaq, doesn't say a word to him, and sits down with Kobe. And Shaq told me that was the moment when he knew it was done, that he was being axed. And that was a moment when it was over. So Kareem Rush gave me a lot of really good gold, stuff like that, little things.
That's awesome. Now this is going to be like rapid fire. So just like on just some of you've covered so many different figures in sports. So just your favorite anecdote about a couple of these guys.
Now wait, you have to at least let people in here. You sent me them and I refused them. Like you
Yes.
told me what you were going to ask, and I was like, I don't want to know. I want to be surprised. So I have not looked.
Yes. So first, Barry Bonds.
So Barry Bonds is it's funny. I wrote that story about John Rocker. Barry Bonds is the worst human being I've ever written about. Um, he being mean was sport to that guy. It really was. I've never seen a person who went out of his way to make people's lives worse. It was actually fascinating. I'll tell you a funny thing. He had a college teammate, a pitcher at Arizona State, Jose Rodiles. And I interviewed Jose Rodiles for this book because Barry played with him at Arizona State. And when I was trying to get Bonds to talk for the book, I was like, hey, I talked to this guy and this guy. I said, I talked to Jose Rodiles. And Bonds goes, I don't know who that is. And I was like, that's weird. And I called Jose Rodiles and I was like, Barry says he doesn't know who you are. And Jose Rodiles goes to me, I swear to God, direct quote, doesn't know who I am. The guy was in my fucking wedding. And like, that was Bonds just being Bonds. Like I said to him, I talked to your Cub Scout den mother. He's like, I wasn't in Cub Scouts. I literally have Barry Bonds' Cub Scout picture. You know, like he did stuff like that just to make your life worse. I've encountered many bad people, not a ton, but enough. I've never encountered someone who worked to make your life worse and harder.
Okay. Next one, Dwight Gooden. He's another older one.
I love Dwight Gooden. So Dwight Gooden is a sad. Do you guys don't know who Dwight Gooden is? Oh, Kendall, you're killing me here. Dwight Gooden was one of the great pitchers of all time. 86 Mets, Dr. K, Cy Young, and Rookie of the Year, and blah, blah, blah. So Dwight Gooden, here's a sad thing. Dwight Gooden, he's had drug problems for years. Him and Darryl Strawberry really struggled with drugs. And a couple years ago, Dwight Gooden on Christmas was dressing up as Santa at a strip club in New York for like $300 a night, which was heartbreaking. But I'll tell you a cool thing about Gooden. I was working at Sports Illustrated and Gooden had just written a book called Heat, his autobiography. He didn't really know me from anyone. And I'm like, hey, congrats on the book. How's it going? And he was literally in uniform getting ready to go on the field. He goes, come with me. And he takes me out to his trunk and he opens the trunk of his car and he takes a book and he signs it in front of me. Like, Dwight Gooden, hey, read this. I really hope it helps you. And it was like all about his recovery, which has not gone very well. But I just found the moment so sincere and so warm. Like he really wanted me to read his book and he really wanted me to get something from it. And he's had so many troubles. And people are like, oh, he's a bad guy. I'm like, he's not a bad guy. He's just an example of what cocaine does to a guy and the addiction, the power of addiction. He's actually a really nice human being. It always breaks my, I always think of him and the joy of handing me that book.
Okay. Next, Walter Payton.
So, hey, let's go. Kendall, Walter Payton. Okay, good. Just checking. Walter Payton, NFL's all-time leading rusher for a long time. I wrote his biography. And one of the things that led me, true story, to do his biography is I was a young writer at Sports Illustrated, maybe 1999, same time as, 1999, same years as John Rocker. And the editors asked me, they needed someone to fly out to Illinois and interview Walter Payton, who at this point was very sick with, he would end up dying of bile duct cancer. And they asked if I wanted to go up because he was trying to raise awareness for organ donations. And they said, do you want to go out and interview Walter Payton? Of course, of course. What's it? You're going to say no. I fly out there and I get to Walter Payton's office where he was. I did not recognize him. He was so little and so shrunken from this disease. And I remember sitting across from him at a desk and he was talking and his eyes were yellow from jaundice. And just sitting across from this guy, another guy, poster on the wall kind of guy, and he's shrunken and he's sad and he knows he's going to die soon, and he's doing this. He's talking to you about organ donors. And the interesting thing is, reporting that book, there were a lot of unflattering things I learned about Walter Payton because we all have unflattering things. He had a kid out of wedlock he never really cared for. He definitely struggled with depression and suicidal tendencies. Not a great dad, all that, blah, 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 blah. I always remember this guy at the end of his life sitting across from me, taking the time to talk to some 27-year-old reporter he doesn't know, trying to raise organ donor awareness and thinking like no matter what bad he had done in his life or what missteps, he was still the guy who was trying to do right at the end of his life.
All right, two more. Roger Clemens.
He's probably that's my least favorite. My books I've written, if you're thinking what book shouldn't I buy by me, make it that one, or get it for a nickel. He said, what can I say about Clemens? It's interesting. I'll tell you, in fact, I'll make it this. The reason I don't like that book compared to the others, like the reason I felt the worst about it was he's just not at all intuitive, or he's not one to think about himself and his misdeeds and missteps and blah, blah, blah. I always say if you could take a reading of his brain, right, it would be baseball, eat, sleep, breasts, baseball, breasts, eat, breasts, eat. The one thing I will say that made it interesting, because I didn't find him he wasn't that interesting, but he had an older brother, Randy Clemens, who was his hero growing up. Clemens grew up in Ohio and then Texas. Randy Clemens was his hero. And he ended up becoming a heavy duty drug addict, his brother. And Roger Clemens' sister-in-law ended up being murdered by drug dealers who were looking for his brother. And that ended up taking the book in a kind of path I didn't see it going. But Roger Clemens, not my favorite.
And the last guy, Brett Favre, and this is kind of a two-part question. So your favorite Brett Favre story, and then you interviewed over 500 people for the book, but Brett blew you off the couple times you were scheduled, and you never ended up talking to Brett. So what's it like writing a book about someone's life and never actually talking to them about what you've learned?
Well, that happens a lot, more than you think. My favorite Brett Favre story is actually, I just quoted him today, actually. One of my favorite lines ever, and I use it all the time, was from Brett Favre. Do you guys see the movie There's Something About Mary? You ever see the movie? Ben Stiller movie? Brett Favre was in it. It was supposed to be Drew Bledsoe. Then it was supposed to be Steve Young. They couldn't do it, so Brett Favre was in it. And he was very wooden in the movie. It was not a great performance. And one day, a teammate says to him, "Hey, Brett, I saw you in Something About Mary. Man, you're not a good actor." And Brett Favre's reply is one I've used a million times. I love it. He goes, "Hey, how many movies have you sucked in?" And I just think it's like the greatest response ever. How many movies have you sucked in? And it applies to everything. Like I was interviewing some football player today, and he's like, "I only played in 3 NFL games, so I'm not much of a success." And I told him that story, and I was like, "How many football games have I played in?" Favre was a super weird experience. I didn't really want to write the book, and then ended up loving it. It was strange. I kept getting blown off by him, and then ultimately he didn't talk to me. I reached out to his sister Brandy on Facebook, and she accepted my friend request. And I DM'd her, and I was like, "Hey, my name's Jeff Pearlman. I'm working on a book about your brother. Any chance of when I come down to Mississippi, you'd be willing to grab coffee?" And she's like, "Yeah, well, DM me when you're here, maybe." And I'm just thinking I'm going to be blown off because Brett Favre isn't talking to me. I get down to the Kill, Mississippi, where they live, and I DM her on Facebook. And she goes, "My mom and I are at the house. Why don't you come by the house?" Okay. I drive out to the house. It's where Brett grew up. They still live in the same house, a family house. The Favres live on this. It's a private road with only Favres living in all the houses. It's kind of fascinating. In the middle of nowhere, Mississippi. And I get to this really nice house, and Brandy's there, and Bonita, Brett's mom, is there. And Bonita, the mom, says to me, "So is Brett talking to you for the book?" And I was like, I don't know. And I thought that would be it. And she goes, "All right, well, what do you want to know?" I probably spent 2 hours there just chatting. They sent me home with scrapbooks. They literally sent me home with Brett Favre's childhood scrapbooks. It's funny because Hurricane Katrina had hit not that long earlier, and the scrapbooks were filled. I got home, and all the mice had scurried up into their closets, not joking, filled with mouse shit. So like I came into my house and went like this, and you heard, it was disgusting. My wife's like, "Please take that out." But it was remarkable. I interviewed both his brothers. I interviewed his mom, his sister, uncles, cousins, aunts, all the whole thing, and never got Brett Favre. And it didn't really matter because I had just amazing story after amazing story.
Now, last question, and then we'll open it up to a few from the audience. You are extremely engaged on Twitter. You've called yourself, huh?
Too much so, I think.
Yeah. So how do you balance like seeking feedback and engaging with your fans versus getting caught up and like consumed with what people are saying about what you're writing or what your opinions are? And all of that? Like, how do you balance that?
I wish I knew. I hate Twitter. Like, I hate Twitter, but writing is boring. Like, that's the problem. Like, not writing is boring, but it's repetitive, and you're in front of a laptop all day, and it's almost like you have this side conversation. But if you could tell me tomorrow, if I felt that Twitter was no benefit to me promoting a book or contacting sources, I mean, I'm still day by day tempted to get rid of it because it's just toxic, So,
But you follow 64,000 people on there.
well, I'll tell you why I do. So that's interesting. There's a reason. People are like, you always get the, hey, nice ratio, loser. And the reason I do it is I swear to God, it's super simple. So you look at like celebrities, right? Taylor Swift, just an example. She probably has 50 million Twitter followers and she follows 120 people. Kobe, when he was alive, 20 million Twitter followers, whatever, 500 people. Jeff Pearlman, not a celebrity. I have about 60,000 followers and I probably follow 62,000. And here's why. I learned something about Twitter when it came to book promoting, which is this. I'm writing a book about the Shaq Kobe Lakers. I'm going to need to direct market this book to those fans, like the best I can. If I follow Kobe fans, if I follow the people following Kobe and they follow me back, that's a direct market to them when I tweet, right? So like now they know I have a book out. Now they can engage. Now they can tell their friends. So like when I was doing the Favre book, I would literally go to Brett Favre's Twitter feed and follow Favre's followers. And I would say 30% follow you back. Those are the very people who are going to want to be interested in your book. That's why I do it. 100% for marketing and PR. And I do pay attention to people when they reach out to me. I always respond to DMs, et cetera. But I use it mainly as a marketing tool. And sadly, I also use it to get in stupid political arguments. I don't care if people insult my writing or say you suck or whatever. That doesn't really bother me. But I being called a libtard or whatever, that stuff sets me off a little bit.
All right, so we're going to open it up.
Don't be like me. Don't be like me on social media.
You're one of the more entertaining follows, though.
Oh man, yeah. The damn done writing books is a damn gone from Twitter. That I can tell you.
So I've opened up the chat. So if you have a question for Jeff, if you guys want to type it into the chat, and then I'll unmute you so you can ask the questions once you guys type them in, and we'll choose a couple.
This might be the kind of awkward moment where nobody. Oh, someone has a question. Okay.
All right, James Harrow, you can go first.
First of all, love your books. Think I read all of them actually, but the Clemens one. So that's probably one I cannot read. Currently reading the Lakers one now. Have you ever thought about writing a book on the ABA, similar to almost like the USFL, like with that same market?
Okay, so James, have you ever read Loose Balls by Terry Pluto?
I have not. I've heard of it though.
It's so ridiculously good. It's great, and you can probably get it on eBay for like $1.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think another one is needed. Oh, there it is, Loose Balls. Man, Michael's stepping up big time. Michael there has Loose Balls. I cannot recommend that book enough. It's just great. So I was just like, I don't know. The other thing that's interesting, I will say, nostalgia moves with time. So like, as an author, you want to tap into book readers, obviously. And nostalgia moves, nostalgia progresses. And I'm not sure if there's, like the ABA is a long time ago now. I'm not sure there's the same market there was for that when Terry wrote that book. Like I'm just not sure there are a million people clamoring for an ABA book anymore. But I highly recommend it. It's
other than Bo Jackson, do you have any other specific ones that you're interested in, players that you're looking to do?
Well, the book I really want to write, my dream book is a Tupac book. I'm a big hip hop fan. I've always wanted to write a Tupac biography. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but that's kind of a dream. But no, Bo has been on my radar for a long time. Like I really want to do it. I think the thing about Bo Jackson that I love, not that you asked, is like the mythology of it all. Like if he had just stayed healthy, I don't think he's probably that great of a book. But the fact that you have this two-sport athlete who came and went, and he lives on YouTube clips and memories and these crazy stories makes it this really almost like this Herculean sort of, kind of mythology to him that I just love. So I don't have my next. After that, I don't know. Thanks for reading the books. I greatly appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Next one from Sam Cohn.
Hey, Jeff, first off, a lot of interesting stories. Thank you. It's been great meeting you. My question for you is when you get all these interesting stories and meet all these interesting people to write a book, what's your process like of filtering through stories in terms of like taking all of this and putting it into something?
It's a nightmare. I couldn't walk into my office room. It's gonna be too dark. I basically so I print every interview out and I print every clip out. My wife's like, you're wasting way too much paper. So I always recycle everything at the end, but like I print every interview out. So like if you went into my office right now, you would see I have all these folders, like with Bo Jackson, I'm doing Bo Jackson. So I have folders with every Raiders interview, every Royals interview, Auburn, growing up in Bessemer, Alabama, all divided into interviews. And the interviews will then be sorted chronologically. So he played with the Raiders from 87 to 90. So I'll do it, guys who were just there in 87, guys who are in 87, 88, guys who are there in 80. And then I also have I end up having 5,000 pages of printed articles that I'm using as sources. And I'll have them chronologically arranged as well. Because generally these books have at least a sort of chronology to them. You're not going to, maybe you'll start a Bo Jackson book with, your prologue will be some moment, but then you're going back in time and you're going, he's a kid in Bessemer, Alabama. So I start with those clips, print them out, have them in front of me, highlights. Interviews in front of me. Okay. Highlights, markings. And it's like, it's probably not the best way. Like if you're planning on writing books, you probably don't want to be like me. You probably want to be a little more organized and a little more digital. And I'm also the guy, I tend to be pre-COVID. I was just saying to someone today, I really miss coffee shops. It's my place of happiness. And I'm the guy basically in the coffee shop. You're like, I don't know if I want to sit near that guy. Like I have like these duffel bags overloaded with clips and I'm hunkered down on 2 tables and I'm talking to myself and cursing out loud, blah, blah, blah. Like it's a painful process for me.
So the next question is going to be from Simon Gibbs. So Simon is actually the chief editor of the Vanderbilt Hustler. So a little
nice.
Little bit of Nashville connection. And I'm actually a Vanderbilt alum, so I read the Hustler and the Tennessean when I was in college. So I'm sure he's got something.
Wait, do they have a journalism major now at Vandy?
No, they don't.
Man.
Still as great as a student newspaper though.
It's amazing. And also all the, I don't have to name them all, but that Miles and Miles, a lot of Tyler Kepner's a really good friend of mine. Lee Jenkins. Yeah, it's awesome.
I had a conversation with Tyler a few weeks ago, but in the name of, so I'm the sports editor, like Dan said. And so obviously I actually recently read 3 Ring Circus, and obviously I have to ask about that one little note at the bottom of the page on Stackhouse with Kobe. And I have to ask if you have any other Stackhouse stories, because having covered him for now a year, he's a very interesting guy, and I just can't seem to crack his shell.
Why? What do you mean? Why can't you crack him? How so?
I think he is. First off, this might not be the right thing to say, but I don't know if he treats student journalists the same way he treats every other journalist.
Yeah.
And I think Justin Hershey, who's in this Zoom, can attest. There's a little bit of a condescending tone in some of the conversations we have with him. That said, I know he's got millions and millions of stories, none of which he's said in any press conference or interview we've had with him, but I'd just be curious to hear what he's told you.
So, all right. So I did a story on Stack when he was with the Nets at the end of his career. Then I had this brief exchange. I don't know Stackhouse super, super well. I will say the best thing you can do, really do, is to me, you need to know everything about Jerry Stackhouse.
Yeah.
You're not the first student journalist. In fact, I can tell you as a former student journalist, we all get stomped on. And I mean, the basketball coach when I was at Delaware could not have been more condescending and asshole-ish to me when I was there. He's apologized in the years since, but he was a dick to me, and because they know they can stop all over you and they don't really have respect for you, right? So what can you do? Freaking major in Stackhouse. Take a week and just read everything there is to learn about Jerry Stackhouse. Know everything about him. Drop names when you're with him. Drop experiences. Drop games that he'll be like, whoa, how the hell do you know that? Show you have this mountain to climb. And the only way you climb it is by freaking outworking the guy from the Tennessean or the AP or whoever who's covering Vandy. And the way you do that is by showing Stackhouse more about him. And the other thing is, a lot of these guys, college coaches, even if they're, guys like Stackhouse who should know better, they like testing you, and they like testing the boundaries to see how far they can go. and they want to see if you're going to stand up or not. You know, like I used to be a guy when I was a young reporter who took a lot of junk from athletes, and I finally stopped. And I was like, I don't need to take this shit. And like, so like, don't cower in this guy's presence. I'm not saying you do, but don't. You know, like you belong there just like everyone else. But I would go back. Like he did a lot of Slam Magazine. Loved Jerry Stackhouse back in the day. Go through the archives of Slam Magazine. Learn obscure little things about Stackhouse that you didn't know. You know, like just go in armed. Ask if you can. Have you done a like detailed profile of Stackhouse yet?
We've done some. I wouldn't say we've done detailed profiles. We did like a longish story that a few of us co-bylined when he came here. But we haven't really, like I said, we haven't really cracked a show. We haven't gotten to the bottom of it. But I think that's something that I'd like to pursue this semester, at least as basketball season starts.
You 100% should. Like tell the SID or whoever you want to do a long. Can I sit down with him for a half hour and then show up and freaking know your shit times 1,000? You know, like make him forget that you're a student journalist and make him be impressed. Holy crap, this guy knows what he's talking about. They're just testing you. Like most of the time, they're just testing you.
Well, Vanderbilt decided to get rid of most of their SIDs.
Yeah, I wrote a story on that one if you want to check that out too.
Did they really?
It was a disaster. It was restructuring and it was in the middle of COVID, and coincidentally, so they call it restructuring when they, a month and a half, 2 months before the fact, offered them all optional buyouts and they provided no detail, and everyone sort of just clicked through the email and were like, I'm not taking that. Wow. And then they fired, and then they restructured and said it wasn't due to COVID or anything like that, which I don't know.
Wait, so do they not have a sports information director?
So much to my surprise, there's like 2 or 3 SIDs that are doing like every single sport. It's a huge pain. The guy who writes for Vanderbilt Athletics' website, like the one editor, the one writer for their own website is an SID for 4 sports.
Wow.
Now, if you really wanted to do a story with some great stories, you could interview a lot of Vanderbilt football fans and players about what a miserable existence it's like to root for that team.
I've gotten some good anecdotes from parents in the past few weeks on that.
Yeah, that's good.
So
I was there. They were bad when I was there at the Tennessean. They were always
the wrestling beat was probably more interesting than some of the Vanderbilt football games.
Oh yeah, it probably was actually.
Mike Brodsky will be our next questioner. Mike, I think he's shown at least 2 of your books.
Oh yeah.
The arsenal of the bookshelf behind him.
Okay, Jeff, rank in order from favorite to least favorite.
So I just want to say, I used to do a Q&A on my website, and I'd always do this where I would ask them to rank. Do you want me to just read them off and rank them?
Yeah, read them off and rank them.
So he wants me to rank. So I'd always take, one of the things I would do is take random stuff from all over all sorts of life, all corners of the world. Chutes and Ladders, white barbecue sauce. Hiroki Kuroda. That was the Dodger guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brownie Batter, Stone Balloon, great bar in Newark, Delaware. Schweppes Club Soda, Pittsburgh Maulers with the USFL. Weekend at Bernie's. Oh, and Michael Che. I'll go Pittsburgh Maulers, number 1. Chutes and Ladders, number 2. Michael Che, number 3. Schweppes Club Soda, Stone Balloon. I threw up there on my 21st birthday. Kuroda, white barbecue sauce. Brownie Batter, which I don't like, and Weekend at Bernie's, which is one of the worst movies ever. That was very nice job there. That was good.
All right, next question is going to be from Andrew Manis.
Hey Jeff, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Andrew.
So interesting question for you. How do you feel like your perspective on life changed when you were a young man traveling to all these different places, especially the time with everything going on, as you mentioned, the rocker story and learning their stories, people's cultures, and to tail off on that, did it impact your career as a writer?
I just want to say it's always so depressing when people are like, remember when you were young? And it's like, yeah, it's funny. That's fair. You know, that's actually a really good question. I think what happens as you get older is you stop taking this stuff as seriously as you used to. You really do. You just stop taking it as seriously. And like when I was a young writer, I was an asshole. I mean, I was really an asshole. I was insufferable. I didn't want to be edited. If you dare change a word, how dare you? I'd fight for that word. Blah, blah, blah. Everything I write is, blah, blah, like this whole thing. And then I still take writing very seriously. I still love writing, but I recognize that like an editor can help. And I recognize that like, if this story isn't the best, I mean, I always try my best, but if it turns out a way and they edit it and I'm not, there'll always be another story. And one thing I really learned, one lesson I learned big time. And actually I have a good friend, her name is Miran Fader. She writes for Bleacher Report. And we've kind of had a mentor-mentee relationship for a while. And she wrote a story when she was at the Orange County Register about a local women's basketball coach. And she was horrified by how it was edited. And she's like, it's going to be so embarrassing. I can't believe this. And I was like, listen, I'm telling you, the people you wrote about are going to love it. As long as their names are spelled correctly, they're going to be very happy. Story comes out. She's like, you were right. They loved it. They were blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you just become more relaxed as you get older. You still want it to be great. I never just throw it in and like half-ass a story. I still go all out, but I'm more relaxed about it and I'm more at ease. And I'm aware. I'll tell you what the biggest thing is. This is the biggest difference between me, 26 at SI, me, 48 writing books. I am well aware that this job is not that important. Like, I get it. I'm a sports writer. I'm really not changing the world. It's a great job. It's a joyful job. I'm so lucky to have it. I love doing it, but it's not that important. And there are people who have many more important jobs than I do and harder jobs than I do. So once you kind of realize that, I think you're able to relax a little bit more and sort of roll with it. And I needed that. And a lot of us young writers at SI, we all thought what we were doing was, saving lives. And at the end of the day, it's entertainment and that's great, but it's not that important.
Next question is from Josh.
There we go. Hey, Jeff, this has been fantastic.
Oh, thanks, Josh.
I also happen to be Daniel's uncle, and so I'm very biased. And Daniel, kudos for another great panel. So, Jeff, I'm also a native New Yorker.
Where you from?
Mets fan, born and bred.
Where you from?
I saw a lot of games that Dwight pitched in '85, and then I saw a lot of games he pitched in '86, including the World Series. And I'm fascinated by that whole team, not just Dwight and Strawberry, but, Keith Hernandez, Gary Carter, and Mookie Wilson. And I was at the game 6 when Mookie hits the ground ball. But Lenny Dykstra is one of the most incredible characters for so many reasons. I'm curious whether you've ever interviewed him. He's been in jail, I think, a few times. He may still be in jail. I don't know. I'm just curious as to what you know and can tell us about Lenny.
Wait, what part of New York are you from, Josh?
Great Neck.
Oh, Great Neck. All right. I married a Long Island girl. I'll tell you a crazy Lenny Dykstra story. This is a true story. This just happened this year. So Lenny Dykstra, for those of you, Kendall, Lenny Dykstra? Yeah, right. Lenny Dykstra, yeah. You're better for not knowing Lenny Dykstra. Lenny Dykstra was my daughter's wrong, right? Lenny Dykstra? You know who Lenny Dykstra is?
I know what story you're going to
tell. Oh, yeah. Good point. She goes, I know what story you're going to tell. So Lenny Dykstra was the center fielder for the 86 Mets. He's insane. He's actually insane. I think he's literally insane. And on Twitter, recently, he started bashing me, right? I don't know what it was. It might have been politics or something, but he started going off on me on Twitter. And this is actually crazy. He's bashing me on Twitter, and I wrote something back to him. And all of a sudden, he posted a picture of my wife on Twitter and said, let's rate Jeff Pearlman's wife on her hotness, all right? So my wife had just donated a kidney to a stranger. My wife is a social worker. Like, she's one of the best people you ever find. And I DM'd Lenny Dykstra, and I was like, listen, you can say whatever you want about me. This really, I feel like, crosses a line. I would appreciate it if you take that down. And he wrote back a few minutes later. He's like, yeah, man, I was just checking to see if you were man enough to defend your wife. I appreciate that. All's good. I'm taking it down. My wife, all of a sudden, she was actually flying at the time, I swear to God. And she's wondering why her like Twitter mentions are like lighting up. And I had to tell her that Lenny Dykstra is rating her hotness. So all that happens. My wife's birthday is coming up. Do you guys know the website? All right, here, Kendall, I'm going to, do you know Cameo, where you can order celebrities to do appearances? Yeah, okay. Lenny Dykstra's on Cameo. I thought it'd be funny for Lenny Dykstra to do a video being like, hey, happy birthday, Catherine, I give you a 9, or something like that, blah, blah, blah. So I actually do it. I order a Cameo, Lenny Dykstra does this video. And he does it, and it's kind of weird. He has his shirt off when he does it, but he does the lines and he says it. I give the video to my wife, and I DM Lenny Dykstra that day on Twitter. And I say, hey, I just want to thank you for the video. And he writes back and says, refresh my memory. What video are you talking about? He literally just sent me the video that day. And I realized Lenny Dykstra does not control his own Twitter feed. He's actually hiring someone who's doing his outrageous tweets. It's not actually him tweeting. So I'm like having this back and forth with him, and he's posting my wife on Twitter, and it's not even him. I think it's some like douchebag college kid who he thought he wanted to have attitude on Twitter. And I'm like, that's just so Lenny Dykstra. When I wrote the book, The Bad Guys Won, about the 86 Mets, almost everyone talked. Not everyone, but almost everyone. Dykstra would only talk if I flew him to New York, put him up in a first-class hotel, blah, 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 blah. It was like a 26-year-old. I don't know how old it was, 28 years old, probably making $60,000. I wasn't flying Lenny Dykstra into New York. Not a fan of the guy. He's not my cup of tea at all.
Now, last question, and then we'll let you go. We really appreciate you taking the time, and I think the listeners really enjoyed this. But you do a podcast, Two Writers Slinging Yang, and you have a number of journalism guests, and kind of a twofold question. Do you believe it's possible to just be a writer in today's day and age, or do you have to have the versatility to kind of be on, whether it's podcast, TV, video stuff, the way the world is trending? And then 2, who are the 3 guests that you would love to have on the podcast that you haven't been able to have yet?
Okay, so it's interesting. There's a writer. Do you guys know Wright Thompson at ESPN? Okay, Wright Thompson's great. He's not on Twitter. He's not on Facebook. He's not on social media. He had a book come out today about whiskey. Okay, a book come out about whiskey, and it's like already a bestseller on Amazon. And when I saw that, I never get jealous of people. I never get jealous of people. But I was like, this guy's able to do this without being on social media. That's amazing. Like, that's amazing. And he doesn't have a podcast, blah, 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 blah. So I think it's possible. I do think it's possible. It's rare. And if I were a young writer coming up now, I probably wouldn't try that path because it's really hard. And places want to know that you have an audience coming with you and that you know how to use social media and blah, 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 blah. So I don't think it's possible if you're really established, but I wouldn't feel comfortable right now. And I've had a pretty good career. At least I've exceeded my own expectations, but I wouldn't feel that comfortable losing it all. It's tempting. 3 writers I would like to have. I really want to have John Feinstein on from the Washington Post. I would love to have Chuck D from Public Enemy, one of my favorite hip hop groups. I asked him and he kind of, yeah. And then I really like Sally Jenkins at the Washington Post, another great columnist. So I'd say those 3 are my hit list. I got to try Chuck D again. I had one of my favorite hip hop artists, is a guy named Royce59, and he actually did it a few weeks ago, and that was a freaking thrill for me. So, I like having writers of different stripes.
Yeah. So sorry, I got one more question before we let you. Will you be hosting your next episode of Two Writers Slinging Yang from the Four Seasons Total Landscaping in Philadelphia?
Here's the question. Wait, can we do a poll? Let's do a poll real quick of hands. All right. Because we've been having this debate. When Donald Trump tweeted it's at the Four Seasons, was it originally booked for the Four Seasons and then they couldn't get the Four Seasons and they felt pressure to put it somewhere else? Or did they just book it at the Four Seasons landscaping place and Trump misunderstood? So wait, I want to take a poll here. Raise your hand. Was it ever booked do you think it was booked at some point at the Four Seasons Hotel, the actual hotel? So we all agree. Yeah, we're all in agreement here. It is everything Trump in one little moment. Is everything Trump in one. Let me ask you one more question by poll. Is everyone here fairly confident that come January 20th, Biden is the president? Is anyone not? Oh, Brodsky. Don't say that. Everyone else, I think he will be, but I can't stand what's going on. Anyway, I don't mean to go political. Sorry.
Yeah, no. And then if you ever got a chance to interview Trump, would you take that chance?
Yeah, I would, but I wouldn't. I would, of course I would, but I would bring it. You know, like I'm not gonna tiptoe around him like people. I'll tell you what killed me. Did you ever see the interview when he was asked? He was asked, what's your favorite Bible verse? If you haven't seen this, it's on YouTube. He's like, what's your favorite book? The Bible. Well, do you prefer the Old Testament or New Testament? He goes, both. Both are great. Both are great. Well, what's a Bible verse? What's your favorite Bible verse? That's a personal question. I don't really feel comfortable answering that. And the guy goes, well, maybe just one. Is there one? He's like, I really think that's a personal. First of all, that's not a personal question. That's an actual very public question. And then they gave up. And I feel like you have to say at that point, you can't name a Bible verse, can you? Like, I think a reporter needs to say, can you not name a Bible verse? And they didn't. And I just think people, when they interview Trump, they let him squirm. Everything with him is everything's the best. This is the best. He always says, people are telling me. And the reporter never says, well, who are the people? Can you name one? Who are the people? Name one. So I just think like a good reporter, you know, I thought Leslie Stahl did a great job in 60 Minutes, but I just think it's hard.
And then you mentioned when you were talking about the USFL players and the divide, the African-American versus the white players, 50-50 support trope, like Herschel Walker has become one of his biggest advocates. Yeah. And he was on the New Jersey Generals and played for that team and saw it up close. Like what do you attribute that to? Because some of the stories in the book you share about Herschel's time with the Generals, I mean, it was just like a circus.
I can only assume too many blows to the head. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. I don't understand. I just don't understand it. I could not tell you. Herschel Walker ended up playing 6 years in Dallas, 3 years with the Vikings, 3 years with the Eagles, 1 year with the Giants, and then 3 USFL seasons. That's a lot of blows to the head. That's the only, it's confusing to me. Considering he saw this guy up close, I don't get it. So, I don't know.
All right, Jeff, thanks a lot for being here. I put your website into the chat so you guys can check out all of his podcasts and books, and highly recommend. My personal favorites are Gunslinger and Football for a Buck. I still have to finish Three Ring Circus. I've started it, but have not finished it yet. So
you're saying my new book sucks? Is that what you're saying? Like you're bored and you're not really into it?
No, it's just.
I know how it is.
The election took precedence for a little while.
No, of course. I'm kidding. Thank you for letting me do this. I very enjoyed this.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.